Daf Yomi Tractate Sanhedrin, page 35b, top of the page with the words Ushma Minam, Ushma Shemes Lo Mes, Yahol Yutame, Amart Lo Yutama. And he heard that a relative of his died. One might have thought that he should return and become ritually impure with the impurity imparted by a corpse to bury his relative. You said he shall not make himself impure. The death of his relative will not override so significant a mitzvah from the Torah. Yachol kishem she'enu mitame le'achoso kach enu mitame le'meis mitzvah tamu lomar u'le'achoso hu she'enu mitame aval mitame le'meis mitzvah. One might have thought, just as he may not become impure to bury his sister, so he may not become impure to bury a meis mitzvah. Therefore, the verse states specifically for his sister, teaching that he may not become impure only to bury his sister, as others can attend to her burial, but he may become impure to bury a meis mitzvah. Shabbat, Shenidachat, Mipnei Avoda, Eino Din Shtehek for us, Mace, Mitzvah Docha Osa. Having cited the bright of proving that the burial of a mitzvah overrides the temple service, Reish Lakish continues his suggestion with regard to Shabbat, which is overridden due to the temple service. Is it not logical that the burial of a mitzvah overrides it? Amar le Ritzicha Tochiach Shedocha es Havoda ve'ena docha es Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, the halacha of murder, meaning the obligation to kill one found liable to receive court-imposed capital punishment, proves that this is not the case, as it overrides the temple service. Meaning, for example, if the only priest present is liable to receive court-imposed capital punishment, he is taken to be killed, despite this resulting in the negation of temple service, but it does not override Shabbat. Ritzicha gufa tidche ez Shabbos v'kal v'chomer. Ma odusha docha Shabbos ritzicha docha osa shneimar me'im mizbechi tikachen lamos shema Shabbos shenidachas mivnei avoda eino din shetei ritzicha docha osa. Gemara asks, murder itself should override Shabbat based on this aforetory inference, just as with regard to the temple service which overrides Shabbat. Nevertheless, murder overrides it, and the source for this is as stated, and if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, you shall take him from my altar, that he may die. Exodus 21:14. Then with regard to Shabbat, which is overridden due to the temple service, is it not logical that murder should override it? Amarava Kvar Pascha Tana Dve Rabbi Ishmael. Tana Dve Rabbi Ishmael. Lo Savar Eish Matam Lomar. Rava said in response, it has already been ruled by a Tana at the school of Rabbi Ishmael, and the school of Rabbi Ishmael taught. What is the meaning when the verse states, you shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations on Shabbat day, Exodus 35:3. All labor is forbidden on Shabbat based on the verse, in is you shall not do any manner of work, Exodus 20:10. Why is kindling fire singled out? Ma Talmud Lomar. Either of Yossi, the Lav Yatzis. Either of Nasan the Chalek Yatzis. Kizitanya. How far are Lav Yatzis? The Divrei Rav Yossi. Nasan Omer the Chalek Yatzis. The Gemara interjects, what is the meaning when the verse states this? Is this question, if this question is in accordance with the opinion of the Rabbi Yossi, this transgression was signaled out to teach. The one who lights a fire on a Shabbat violates an ordinary prohibition as opposed to the performance of other types of labor in Shabbat, which one is liable to receive court-imposed capital punishment. If this question is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Natan, this transgression was singled out to divide the various laborers and to establish liability to receive court-imposed capital punishment for performance of any one of them. The Gemara explains, as it is taught in practice, kindling a fire was singled out to teach that one who lights a fire on a Shabbat violates an ordinary prohibition. This is the statement of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Natan says it was singled out to divide the various labors. Either way, it's clear what the meaning of the verse is. Ela amarava tana moshavot kashele moshavot ma Talmud Lomar mechti rein chovas aguf chovas aguf noheges bein baretz bein bachutz baretz mosheves kasev rachman lamali. Gemara clarifies, rather Rava said, the term habitations in the verse imposes a difficulty for the Tana. What is the meaning when the verse states, you shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations on Shabbat day? After all, Shabbat is an obligation on the person himself, not an obligation bound by any specific location. And the halacha is that an obligation on the person himself is practiced whether in Eretz Yisrael or outside of Eretz Yisrael. Why do I need the term habitations that the merciful one writes in the Torah? Mishum the Rabbi Yishmael Amar Talmud Lomar the Amar Talmud Echad Shomea ani ben bechol ben b'Shabbat uma ani b'kaim machal emot yumat v'shar malachot chutz b'mitzad bezdin o eno she'ena ela afil b'mitzad bezdin. Umani mekayma humas v'achol avo lo b'Shabbat eno ela afil b'Shabbat. Rava continues on. One student said, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, that it is, since it is stated, and there is a man a sin deserving. There's in a man a sin deserving of death, and he is put to death. Deuteronomy 21:22. I would derive the court minister's capital punishment both during the week and on Shabbat. And accordingly, how do I realize the meaning of what the verse states concerning Shabbat? Everyone that disagrees it shall be put to death. Exodus 31:14. One possibly is that termed as desecration of Shabbat applies only to other cases in which labor is performed and excludes instances of the death penalty administered by a court, which is not a desecration of Shabbat, or rather derived them from the death penalty administered by a court is prohibited as desecration of Shabbat. How do I realize the meaning of and he is put to death? One possibility is that a mitzvah of executing transgressors applies on weekdays, but not on Shabbat. Rather, the other possibility is that it applies even on Shabbat. Talmud Lomar, Lo tzvarish b'chol moshvodechem, ulehalan hu omer, v'hayu ele lechem l'chukas mishpat, v'der tov b'chol moshvodechem, mad moshavos amor le'alan, based in af moshavos amor kan, based in Rahman lo tzvarish b'chol moshvodechem. As these verses can be interpreted in either manner. The verse states, "You shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations on the Shabbat day." And there, with regard to the punishment administered to murder, the verse states, "And these shall be for you a statute of judgment throughout your generations and all your habitations." Numbers 35:29. Just as the term habitations is stated there is referring to the act of a court, so to the term habitations that is stated here concerning Shabbat is referring to the act of a court. And the merciful one states, "You shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations." This teaches that the court does not administer capital punishment on Shabbat. Amar Abaye, Hasha Damrat, Emer Tzicha Docha as a Shabbat, Emer Tzicha Docha as a Vodim Mikal the Chomer, Ma Shabbos Shenichesa Mipnei Avodah, Emer Tzicha Docha Osa Shetehei Docha as a Shabbos, Eno Din Shelo Tehei Ritzicha Docha Osa. Abaye says, now that you have said that murder of one condemned by the court does not override Shabbat, one should say that murder does not override the performance of the temple service either, based on an a fortiori inference. And just as with regard to Shabbat, which is overridden for the performance of the temple service, murder does not override it, then with regard to performance of the temple service, which overrides Shabbat, is it not logical that murder should not override it? Ela hadachsiv me'im mizbechi tichel amos hahu lekorban yachid lo dachi Shabbat. The Gemara questions this inference, but if so, how would one explain that which is written in the verse concerning one liable to receive court-imposed capital punishment? You shall take him from an altar that he may die. Exodus 21:14. This verse indicates that the court administering capital punishment does override the performance of the temple service. The Gemara explains that verse serves to teach the halacha concerning an offering of an individual which does not override Shabbat. The verse is teaching that the court takes the priest to execute him even if this will result in the offering of an individual not being sacrificed. Amar Rava Yachi lo tehei ritzicha doche korban yachid mikal v'chomer. Rava says, if that is so, one should say that murder should not override even an offering of an individual based on a kal v'chomer, an a fortiori inference.